This fresh coat of the startup life has been sprayed on nice and smooth by Wagner and the Flexo series of paint sprayers. Startup Nation, my wife decided she wanted to rehab her childhood home. The goal was to fix it up and invite a nice family to rent it out. We knew one of the biggest jobs we had to undertake was painting. However, from the walls, the cabinets, and even the siding outside, it was going to be a big task. As entrepreneurs with a company to run, we knew this was going to take up a lot of our time, which is why we decided to get a paint sprayer. And after much research, we decided to go with the sprayer from the Flexio series from Wagner. Startup Nation, these sprayers are top-notch because of its flexibility to paint or stain walls, furniture, cabinets, and more. It's 10 times faster than using a paintbrush, which was a big selling point for us. And you can paint or stain right from the can. It's also easy to clean in 5 minutes, and being great for indoor and outdoor projects, a paint sprayer from the Flexio series clearly needs to be part of the arsenal in your garage. So if you're ready to stain your deck, or like me, fill your daughter's request of a bubblegum pink room, up your game with a paint sprayer from the Flexio series by Wagner. Take it from me, your time will thank you.
It's time to be about that life, the startup life. Here's your host, Dominic Lawson.
All right, Startup Nation, so I hope you're ready to receive some value today. My name is Dominic Lawson, and this is The Startup Life, the show for entrepreneurs and career-minded professionals. You know, Startup Nation, as we go through this new normal, this world pandemic, you know, there are certain things that we need to be mindful of. For one, for those of you who are retailers out there, how to navigate through this new normal and stuff like that, but also building the relationships. And one of the relationships that has been either really great or at odds from time to time is the baby boomer and millennial generation. But to talk about all of this, we have a fantastic guest for you today for sure. He is a graduate of Syracuse University in grad school at Columbia University. He is the former CEO of rue21, transforming into an industry powerhouse, boasting 11 consecutive years of profitability and high growth by energizing and inspiring his team at unprecedented levels. He's also sits on the board of one of my favorite stores, Ali Bargain Outlet. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And he's also the author of Fisch Tales, the making of a millennial baby boomer. I got to talk about that title. He is Bob Fisch. Mr. B, how's it going, man?
I'm great, Dominic. How are you?
I can't complain. You definitely ready to pour some knowledge in the Startup Nation today? Because we can definitely use your advice, my man.
Yeah, and you're one of the first people that even knows Ollie's, which is now a $7 billion company and over 360 stores. So we'll talk about that later. That's great.
For sure. Yeah, me and my friends, we like to get a lot of comic books and graphic novels from there. So definitely one of our go-to spots for sure. But before we kind of dive into that, if you would please, sir, just kind of share with us a little bit about your origin story and background a little bit, if you don't mind, good sir.
Sure, it'd be my pleasure. I've been in retailing over 40 years, and I started with a company called Abraham and Straus out of New York City, which was a division of Federated. And as you know, the world of retail, the names have changed, they've closed, they've consolidated,
right.
And it merged more into being part of what's still today Bloomingdale's and Macy's, part of Federated. Mm-hmm. And it was when I started and when I was there, the number one store in the country. And so it gives you a great background because there's a lot of good leaders and mentors. So for example, people like Mickey Drexler, who ended up building the Gap and J. Crew, or Michael Jeffries, Abercrombie and Fitch. Those are people that I was there and started, and you learn from them. So I started my career there and then moved down to Florida, which is actually my permanent residence, and it still is today, right. And work in a company called Jordan Marsh, and really developed to becoming a senior vice president of all retail there in that company, and then went on to U.S. Shoe Corporation, Casual Corner Group, Luxottica, LensCrafter, things like that, and so, but the most important thing though was about 20 years ago, I ended up saying I could take a good risk of going to a private equity world and joined a company at that time that was called Pennsylvania Fashions, which I recreated into rue21, became the founder, CEO, chairman, and president, and built a business that went was it that I took into bankruptcy, Dominic.
Mm-hmm.
But within 1 year, we came out of it and never missed an estimate as a high growth company for 11 straight years and 45 straight quarters, and built it from back to a private business, took it public in 2009, took it private and sold it back to my equity partners for over $1 billion from a business that should have gone away if people didn't pay attention to it.
Gotcha.
And so that's in my background, and it's really all about not using theory, but giving back based on what I've accomplished.
I hear that. Thank you for sharing that. Bob, if I could ask a quick follow-up, because you talked about bringing it back from the brink of bankruptcy and taking out of bankruptcy and stuff like that. Tell me about those early days at rue21, meeting with the staff, sharing, the new vision and direction of the company and stuff like that.
Sure. And it also applies to, as we're going to evolve in our discussion and even into today's world,
absolutely,
even in the crazy pandemic, because how I look at things now and how I looked at things then are the same, and how I would want to push people now into taking a stand. I came in with a game plan, Dominic.
Mm-hmm.
It was a risk.
Right.
Things in life that can succeed are risks. And what my whole thing is to be engaged and to be really involved with people and be hands-on. That even, I've worked in big companies like Casual Corner Group where we had thousands of stores, but it was really wanting to redevelop. And I came with a game plan that to go after a business that was in trouble. I could have decided that this wasn't right for me. But what I realized is that this had a potential. And instead of just trying to go after conventionalism of going into the malls like Abercrombie and Fitch and Aeropostale and American Eagle, I went after specialty stores and value centers of malls and value strip centers, and where Walmart or Target were dominant, and built a fashion business there. And instead of just looking at ego, Dominic, it was really more what's right to really work with people, build a profit, and work through people. I had 20,000 people that not when I started there, but I had 170 stores, built it up to over 1,200 stores. In fact, it became the largest specialty apparel retailer in store count in America.
Wow. Nobody
has had more stores. And what it was, though, was really building with a lot of youth. And I ended up building with 20,000 people, where 90% of them were under 35. And in the home office, I had almost 400 between 20 and 300 of them were between 20 and 30 years old. So I'm all about that. I believe that the youth and the millennials really can help make a difference and help you build a business.
And, I want to ask you about that, in just a second, but I want to go back to something a little bit, if you will, because, you've seen, retail be on the brink, with rue21 and stuff like that. And even before this world pandemic, we were kind of experiencing what some would call like a retail apocalypse, if you will, right? When you see stores what is it? The sports retail, Sports Authority and other stores, closing stores down and stuff like that. What's your commentary on the landscape of retail, even before the pandemic and even now?
Well, that's a great question, because I'm not one that thinks it's just in a retail apocalypse.
Fair enough.
In fact, I look to building businesses when things are tough. You just can't stay into legacies, and just be at the department stores like the Macy's and not change. You have to change with the times. And so whether it was Rue and taking it over and building it to becoming a volatile business and viable business, or during the recession in 2008-9, I was opening up over 100 stores a year. It has a lot to do with not being afraid to take a stand, but not just what you want to do. It's really realizing what the customer wants.
Gotcha.
And really thinking about them. And people don't always do that, Dominic.
Right.
So to me, it was really, you're absolutely right. Look, right now, 85% or more of retail business is still brick and mortar.
Right.
It's just There are going to be tons of consolidations. The bankruptcies, I could go down the list of everything, whether it's a pandemic or not.
Right.
But I believe that there's still opportunities, and now's the time sometimes to grab those opportunities. And that's what I like to teach and to go over with people so they can make the best of their lives.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing all of that, for sure. One of the things I take from what Bob is talking about, Startup Nation, is definitely checking that ego at the door when it comes to scaling your business and moving forward. So I appreciate all of that, Bob, for sure.
Thank you.
Oh, no worries, no worries. And once again, we're talking to Bob Fisch, the author of Fisch Tales, The Making of a Millennial Baby Boomer. And Bob, you talked about this earlier about how 90% of that workforce in transforming Rue and stuff like that were between 20 and 30 years old. Talk about some of the grassroots level impact that demographic, that millennial demographic had on the success of Rue and turning it around, if you don't mind.
Sure. And first it starts with leadership from above.
Gotcha.
You have to give people a chance to have a voice and to be heard, because weren't we all 25 years old once?
Absolutely.
Dominic?
Absolutely.
Okay. So even though there's different generations, and the reason which I think I should clarify too, that when we talk about making of a millennial baby boomer, I'm kind of like going out there as the first millennial baby boomer, but it doesn't mean that I'm the last.
Right.
And in fact, I own that name and intellectual property and registration of that name. I own it, and I'm working on building on it.
Gotcha.
And what it really means is that each of us have traits of different generations. It's just opening up your mind to get out of your comfort zone, to accept change, and to realize that we have to listen to young people. And so to your question about that, to me, it was really, I call it something reverse mentoring. And that's what I'm building on now also, and working with, actually I'm putting a program on that together with Fashion Institute of Technology, FIT. And reverse mentoring is something really special, because, and that's what I worked on when I started at Rue also, is having the young people really have a say, Dominic, where they are making a difference, where they're part of meetings with senior management. Look, young people have great vision. They understand technology really well, but they sometimes need the help to take that vision to fruition.
Gotcha.
And that's where the baby boomer comes in and helps them and gets them to listen. And sometimes they don't want to listen, millennials.
Right.
But instead of taking the attitude of there's something wrong with them, or, oh my God, they're all the same, maybe we didn't listen as much when we were younger too.
Right.
It's you being smart to know how to get people to listening. And to me, the listening is a major thing, and how to mentor people, which we should get into, is a major thing. So we listened to them, and I did not sit in just an office and building a business of Rue, or building, and changing it around. It was really getting out there and being involved and realizing how important that young person is, and they make a difference.
Absolutely. Bob, I want to ask you this, because you talk about this mutual mentoring type of dynamic, if you will. What are some of those things that somebody from that generation, that millennial, taught you that was just so profound, that just kind of, just totally changed your mind about maybe the way you do business, maybe the way you think of millennials, maybe the way you think about your own life? Just kind of talk about some of those things they've taught you over the years.
Well, and I think they're still teaching me, even
Fair
though
enough.
that I'm not running rue21 as
Gotcha.
the founder, and because they get me out of my comfort zone. Look, I specialize in pushing people to reach their limits and go further than they can, and to not be afraid to take a stand. And so sometimes I think that, and actually when I left Rue, and look, to me, I did really well in my career, but I'm all about the best is still yet to come, whether it's millennials or baby boomers. And I really, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I knew that I was thinking of writing a book. Quite honestly, I don't think it would have been as good or strong if I was still working at Rue, because I was able to spend a lot of time on it to make sure that it isn't just all about me and Rue, but it was really about how to give back and make a difference. And I think what they taught me is that you can go on to your next career, Bob, and not only write a book. I formed a Millennial advisory board.
Mm-hmm.
And that was extremely helpful in putting together not only the book, but building my brand and Millennial Baby Boomer. And so that was really important. In fact, we are having monthly Millennial Advisory Board salons on discussing and Zoom on discussing how to give back. And I'm going to be building on that, not just the Millennial Advisory Board, but adding people to the Zoom to have more people involved in how to bridge the gap. So they really pushed me to really not to be afraid to do something different and also to not make me think like, gee, I'm getting older or something like that.
Gotcha.
To me, it's a lifestyle, not an age. And that's the way I feel. And if I'm teaching them that, then I need to be able to reciprocate.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. And Startup Nation, if you follow Bob Fisch on Twitter, you can see some of these snippets of these Millennial Advisory Board talks that he's talking about on Zoom. If you're listening to the replay on the podcast, we have a link to Bob Fisch's Twitter account there in the show notes for easy access. Thank you for sharing that, Bob. I really appreciate it. I want to go back a little bit because you talked about right after college, you started at Abraham Straus and stuff like that. Kind of talk about what are some of those business principles, those foundational business principles that you learned there that you still use to this day?
Well, just like if you were in sports and you were played for the Lakers or the Celtics with Red Auerbach, the coach, or Pat Riley of the Lakers, they taught you things that you never forget.
Gotcha.
And what I learned a lot about starting off in my career is, and I was allowed to express myself, is confronting issues.
Gotcha. That
to me is taking a stand, not being afraid to take a risk and put it on the line. I know some of it can be cliche, but it really isn't. What young people need to learn today, and people that want to continue in business even older, is to not be afraid to put it on the line as long as you've really thought it through and you have to take that risk. Gotcha. Everything in my life in succeeding in different levels has been because of not being afraid. So that would be really strong. That's number one.
Gotcha.
Number two, mentoring. Abraham and Straus afforded me the opportunity where I could be mentored. But you don't just wait to be mentored, Dominic. You go out and seek mentors. Absolutely. They're not always your boss. Sometimes your boss is the last one that you're going to seek as the mentor. But it's something where you have to push to learn from people. And no matter how I built, and look, I was a CEO at 36, 37 years of age, but I still didn't think that I had all the answers. I still felt that the pieces of the puzzle still needed to be put together. And you learn from mentors. That Mickey Drexler was a great mentor. And in my book, I have a whole chapter about mentors and how important it is for people to seek out people that can help them. So that was also important. And then I think which is really key, and I call it weaponized listening, is being able to listen. And it's people hear things, but they don't listen. And are they paying attention? So it's not only it's to your customer, which is obviously important, but it's also to your peers. It's also to your bosses, and listening to people. And I've never forgot that. I could have been, as young people, aggressive, arrogant, whatever sometimes, but I really always listened, and I always played things out. And I think that that's important.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing. I want to ask a follow-up because you talked about believing in something and standing forward and making tough calls and stuff like that. I want to ask you this, because let's say there's a time where you have to make a tough call and it's the right thing for the organization, for the company, for the group, or for your section, or wherever the case may be, but that it's going to be an unpopular one. As a leader, how do you kind of communicate to your team that, like, I know this in the front end is going to seem bad and it's going to suck, but trust me, in the long run, it's going to be best for all of us. Kind of talk about what a conversation like that would sound like, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and I think that ties in not just only retailing, it ties in today in leaders and who are the real leaders in the country that
Absolutely.
make a decision that, hey, look, nothing's a tougher time right now that you've had a pandemic crisis, you've had riots, you have economic crisis,
Right.
you got political divisiveness, and you got, schools, what's going to go on. So to me, I think, it's really being very authentic, and I think being human, and that what I always felt is, look, I could be very tough, but I was always fair.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe in working with people. I'm a different type of a CEO, and I'm a different type of a leader, where to me, caring about people, loving people is really important, and getting across to them how important they are. And I think that's key. I think that, when whether it was taking a company out of bankruptcy to great success, or during recessions, or now, I think it's encouraging feedback and listening, but make a decision and stand behind it. I never worried about whether it will affect or cost my job. My allegiance was always to the business and employees first. My job security was always second. And I believe that's the same that people should be today. The virus doesn't vote, Dominic. They can't vote. It can't vote.
Right.
And I think that people should worry less about politics. People in turning a business around is worrying about what needs to be, which I call an authentic leader.
Got you. Thank you for sharing that. And that's very powerful. So I appreciate you sharing all of that for sure, because I mean, look, we live in difficult times right now, and, from an economic standpoint, you talk about the political divisiveness, social unrest and stuff like that. And I know a lot of leaders out there, for you, Startup Nation, I know a lot of you out there are having to make tough calls, and you want to make the right decision, but, you're just not sure how to go about. So I appreciate you sharing all of that, Bob, for sure.
Well, if you watch it, I happen to be, in a state where there's a governor that took a stand from day one. I mean, look,
Absolutely.
New York State was the epicenter of
Right.
this whole thing, and it could have gotten even worse. And he's always in the back of people's heads and minds, because he was on TV every day talking about it. And, some people could criticize him for being tough, and some people could criticize when they say, well, how he's enforcing something that's hard to enforce. But you know what? It's not a popularity contest when you have people's lives at stake.
Right.
It's not a popularity contest when you're trying to turn a business around and you're working for people or for an equity firm and tying with them. You have to make decisions sometimes that are tough, but make them sound decisions and base them on facts, not just, I call it's like there's authentic leaders and there's robotic leaders. And to me, robotic leaders are sometimes, they cause divisiveness and poor morale, and they only care about themselves. They're not trusted, and they pretend to listen, and they do corporate speak. Whether it's retail, businesses, politics, whatever, and I'm not going to get into the politics of who's doing what,
Sure.
but people get into corporate speak. And what people need to say is not just like, oh, gee, we're going to cut back the police force and save $1 billion.
Right.
No, how are you doing things? How are you going to send people to school? What are you going to do about it? And I think that what I saw from a governor in New York, and how I also felt that how I ran a business, I would put it on the line, but I would follow through to explain to people why we're doing this, and it gets people through it. You need to be straight with them, and don't put politics into it, whether you're in business or anything else.
For sure. Thank you for all of that. And I definitely understand what you mean by Governor Cuomo and his leadership during these times. So, and it's something I actually absolutely do admire. So I appreciate you sharing all of that for sure. Now, Startup Nation, like we talked about earlier, that, Bob also sits on the board of one of my favorite stores, the Ollie Bargain Outlet. And recently they had provided guidance that beat analysts' expectations and stuff like that, right? So right now, Ollie is doing fairly well during these times. Bob, if you don't mind me asking, man, what are some of the tenets and the attributes and some of the things that that you guys are implementing there at Ollie that small business owners can kind of use in their business to got to get replicate some of that retail success?
Well, it's interesting because I joined Ollie's on the board right before they went public, which is now 5 years.
Right.
It was July 16th. And the company at that time was worth a little less than $1 billion, which is a big value.
Right.
And now it's worth $7 billion.
Right.
Nobody even knows that about it.
Right.
And the first thing when you said those words to me about what did they do, it was a strategy of keeping it simple. They don't complicate. By the way, they don't have an online business.
Right.
Neither does Ross stores. TJ's has a very small one. It depends what the businesses are. They really are all about the merchandise. They all about finding the right merchandise. Good stuff cheap, as they call it. I don't know if you're a member of the Ollie's Army, but because that's what you could join the Ollie's Army and get good deals. But it was really and also and unfortunately he's a good friend of mine, but he just passed away in December. Was the CEO of the company who ran it for 38 years. The consistency, and it still is, because it's consistency of the people working in the company. It's a great belief on my part, and that's why I joined Ollie's, is you work with people, not just to get rid of people when something's tough. Gotcha. Because it's not always better, Dominic, just to say, I got to make a change because business is tough. Yes, if people don't want to listen, you got to make a change. But I think the consistency, and especially now with Ollie's, is that they never closed their doors during the pandemic because they had something that was important to offer to people.
Right.
And now it's their consistency. So I think that, they can jump on things quick at great prices. And as I said, good stuff cheap. And it's a bargain hunt. You go into the store and you're expecting to buy something, you end up buying something else. And they're not into fancy signs. They're not into marble floors. They have cheap rent and they give out good product. And, that's what more people should look at, not just to put programs and plans and spend all this money on consultants and everything all the time. That's what I always believed in, and that's what I also see at Ollie's.
I hear that. Thank you for sharing all of that for sure, Bob. And Startup Nation, when you go to millennialboomer.com, we have a link there in the show notes. If you're listening to the replay on the podcast, you can not only purchase Bob's book, but you can also look at some of the media he has and some of the content that he has on there. And there's also a blog on there as well. And Bob, I want to ask you about one of your blog posts. It's David and Goliath. You posted it back in July 10th of this year. And in it, you talk about how the multiracial future of our country, about how, and we've actually had a vice president from the Federal Reserve here, and he talked about the graying and the browning of America and stuff like that. So when you talk about how the demographics are changing in the future for our country in America, what are some of those demographics changes or business changes you need to consider as the country is kind of moving in a different direction demographically, of course?
Well, if you're talking about the most current blog, I've done a whole series on them.
Gotcha.
And I think that, it's something of where, this whole thing about, taking a stand and yes, it's very important that I'm all for taking a stand. I think Black Lives Matter is incredibly important to get people to understand things.
Right.
And I think, though, that, we have to make sure that we're making decisions that we then can move forward. Like, I live on the block where all the protests in New York were, where even police cars were on fire and all that, with
right.
Thousands of people are going down. But what's important is, and I believe in those protests, but it's what we do about it, and that the young millennial has a opportunity to do something about that. And it's not just, look, the riots have nothing to do with the protesters, really. It's just people agitating coming in. But I think that when we're getting all excited about, statements or even brands that are no longer want to use their names, everything, let's make sure that's important. But let's make sure that what's the most important thing, that there's going to be policy changes and making decisions and following up. Gotcha. And that, to me, I believe the young people can really make a difference on and pushing on. And so, believe it or not, we still have protests in New York. It's still going on. But now, I don't think that, look, the answer certainly isn't riots in Portland and all this stuff. I'm not a big believer that there's no police zones. That's not the answer. It's not getting rid of the police. It's what policies do we need to put together. Again, in New York, Cuomo was criticizing de Blasio because he's going to cut $1 billion of the budget of the police force. He goes, okay, what are you doing, though? What are you doing to make the police force better to handle things and learn?
Right.
And does it have to take 6 to 9 months to make decisions? That's the other thing. I'm all about speed to market. The reason that Rue built well and the reason that Ollie's was built strong was speed to market, and everything we did in merchandising, building stores, cutting through the to make a decision. And not just the belabored decisions. Too much in politics is belaboring it, and that's why people get upset. And it's now who's going to take the action. And I guess you got to vote to take the action too.
Right.
So, and push on that. So that's what I think. And I think this is the time where young people have the opportunity to make that difference.
All right, Startup Nation. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We got to pay some bills. Once again, my name is Dominic Lawson, and you're listening to The Startup Life. This fresh coat of the Startup Life has been sprayed on nice and smooth by Wagner and the Flexo series of paint sprayers. Startup Nation, my wife decided she wanted to rehab her childhood home. The goal was to fix it up and invite a nice family to rent it out. We knew one of the biggest jobs we had to undertake was painting. However, from the walls, the cabinets, and even the siding outside, it was going to be a big task. As entrepreneurs with a company to run, we knew this was going to take up a lot of our time, which is why we decided to get a paint sprayer. And after much research, we decided to go with the sprayer from the Flexio series from Wagner. Startup Nation, these sprayers are top-notch because of its flexibility to paint or stain walls, furniture, cabinets, and more. It's 10 times faster than using a paintbrush, which was a big selling point for us. And you can paint or stain right from the can. It's also easy to clean in 5 minutes, and being great for indoor and outdoor projects, a paint sprayer from the Flexio series clearly needs to be part of the arsenal in your garage. So if you're ready to stain your deck, or like me, fill your daughter's request of a bubblegum pink room, up your game with a paint sprayer from the Flexio series by Wagner. Take it from me, your time will thank you. This episode of The Startup Life is sponsored by SaveTheChildren.org. Startup Nation, Save the Children believes every child deserves a future. In the United States and around the world, they work every day to give children a healthy start in life, the opportunity to learn, and protection from harm. They deliver lasting results for millions of children, including those hardest to reach. They do whatever it takes for children every day, and in times of crisis, transforming their lives and the future we share. Startup Nation, right now, the coronavirus is the biggest global health crisis in our lifetime. It threatens children in every way. COVID-19 has already left many children without caregivers, out of school, and exposed to violence and exploitation. Child poverty is rising. With your support, we can help children in unsafe households and help support distance learning in the face of school closures. Here are some ways your support can make a difference. For just $5, you can buy a baby's first book, providing comfort and inspiring lifelong learning. And for $25, you can serve a nutritious breakfast and lunch to 5 out-of-school children in need. And there's many other ways you can help support Startup Nation. So go to SaveTheChildren.org/SaveKids or www.SaveTheChildren.org/SaveKids. So if you're ready to make a difference, Startup Nation, remember savethechildren.org. Make the change for children. The Startup Life is powered by Ladder. Startup Nation, as an entrepreneur, you are the engine that powers your business. We have had many entrepreneurs on the show, from those that played Division II basketball, quite a few Ironman participants, and even an NFL quarterback. And the one thing they all have in common is that they know getting early morning workout wins leads to business success for the day. However, it's super important what fuel you use for your workout to get that early morning success. And that's where Ladder comes in. Ladder is a sports nutrition company founded by LeBron James and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Unlike other supplements, every batch is tested by a third party that is trusted by all major professional sports organizations, including the NBA, NFL, MLB, and more, to verify the highest standards for quality, but more importantly, safety. Ladder's goal is to help you unlock your best in any situation. Right now, that means access to special offers and expert advice from their community. Personally, I like superfood greens. Not only does it include the most essential nutrients that are hard to get in your diet, like magnesium, zinc, B vitamins, and vitamin D, they also included the Rodelio root, which helps keep you healthier when stress is high, but also it helps support immunity according to many studies. Use code BETTEREVERYDAY for 30% off everything site-wide at ladder.sport. That's BETTEREVERYDAY for 30% off at ladder.sport. So maybe you're not trying to be a 4-time league MVP or a 7-time Mr. Olympia, but you still need the tools to elevate your health that elevates your business. So go with Ladder and prepare to get better every day. All right, Startup Nation, welcome back as we continue our conversation with today's guest here on The Startup Life. For sure. Thank you for sharing that. And Startup Nation, we're wrapping up with Bob Fisch, former founder and CEO of rue21. I want to talk a little baseball a little bit. So I was on your Twitter page. You retweeted a few things about the Yankees. So I'm going to assume you're a Yankees fan. You know, what do you think their prospects are looking like this year?
Well, I kind of am a Yankees fan. I mean, I used to be a Giant fan, but that's a long time ago.
Gotcha.
But you know what? I think their prospects are very good. I mean, look, you know, what I love about the Yankees is their heritage. That's another thing. Heritage, to me, don't destroy heritage. Ralph Lauren shouldn't be taking the polo off the polo shirts. Maybe you got to change parts of a company, but too many people try to change heritage. And I think that they've always built themselves on pride. And I think they have a great shot. But look what happened last year. The Washington team was in last place in the middle of the year and won the championship. So you never know. So, but yeah, I think that I like the way they think, they coach, you know, and I love to see the players, even though they have big jobs and some have big egos, but they do put their egos aside on the Yankees to build as a team.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this, longtime owner, he's no longer with us now, George Steinbrenner, he was always seen as like a shrewd, tough businessman. Was he a shrewd, tough businessman, or was he misunderstood? What's your opinion on him?
I think that he's probably both. I think He was a very shrewd, tough man. You see, do you know how much he bought the Yankees for?
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he bought it for like $10 million back in the 70s.
Yeah,
$11
million,
right?
yes. You know what it's worth today? A couple of billion.
It's a couple of billion. It got to be. The Yankees brand is powerful.
What I want to teach people is to realize that they have opportunities and sky can be the limit for people if you take a stand on things that is factual and you're not just doing it because I just feel like doing it and that's it. Because he was not afraid to take a risk and he saw the vision for the future. And I think that's important. And that's the way I've always lived my life. And that's what I really love working with people. I've helped people go further than they've ever thought. And right now, that's what I enjoy the most, Dominic, is to help people go further. And look, that's why here's somebody who bought a team for $10 million and look what happened. And that it's just like Rue taking over a business that was worth zero and building it to over $1 billion company. So, it doesn't happen by accident. It happens by what we've been discussing and what people could read more in my book. And it's not theory. It's all School of Fish lessons in there and fish food for thought and things that make people think that, it's not just a novel. It's something that people can utilize to do better. And my philosophy is the best is yet to come. And, one more thing on that is that you realize that young people today, 25 years old, 30, they're going to live to 100, Dominic. And the people born today are going to live to 110. That means they're going to be working for 80, 90 years.
Right.
So there's going to be different professions. They have to take it a little slower. People feel now today, if they're not 30 and not multimillionaires, something's wrong with me. Take one step at a time. Don't just go in a job and say after a year, why am I not getting so far ahead promoted? Really, take one step at a time, because there's a long life ahead of you, and there's a lot of putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And as far as me, the best successes that I had in business and life were in my 50s to 60s. And so, and I look at just keep going forward on that. It doesn't have to just be only monetary. It's how you do other things and build things. So that's my belief, and I believe the best is yet to come.
Really quickly, if I could ask you this, who are some of those young leaders, those young CEOs, whether CEOs or whoever, who are some of those young leaders you're just so excited to see, and so excited to see what they kind of ultimately become during the maturation process?
Well, if you're talking about things now, I'm not been talking or working with people right now who are CEOs, Dominic.
Right.
It's been people like that work with me at rue21 that say we're a manager or a district manager that have now become 4 years later the director of operations for a company called Smile Direct Club. You probably know that.
Absolutely.
Yes. So and so prideful that, say, there's one individual in particular who she never thought she'd go past being a manager, and I saw a lot of potential at Rue. And even though these are people that are different levels, working through the chain of commands below me, I don't treat people that way. If I see people with potential, I push their bosses and their bosses' bosses to work with them. And sometimes I speak to them. And I'm very proud that individual is now the head of all operations in her early 30s of some company that's really growing. So things like that is what I'm talking about.
Right.
And to me, it's like, I don't know if you're familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And he's a really interesting character and brilliant. And one of the things he had a video that he did last month that's just impressive for 5 minutes. But the point was, he said, I have these people that were living in Kansas City, these young girls, I want to push to make them billionaires. And so his thoughts and my thoughts are very similar, that you think outside of yourself, Dominic. You don't have to worry. If you want to get ahead, don't worry about that. I never worried about, is there going to be competition there? Or what happens if I don't push to be, better than everybody else? I didn't worry about stepping on people. I just did a really good job, and I wanted to see people to develop. And the more you push people to develop, to succeed, they help you. And they help you succeed. So that's my real philosophy on that. And so I get energized when I see, can I help people? Somebody just was in the middle, I'm working with them on, who's starting to write a book, how I can help her take it to the next level, or how I take somebody just started out in a small retail business of building a clothing line, and how do I get them to do well? Those things are as valuable to me as even taking somebody and making him a CEO. Yeah, I did work with a guy who ran this company, Jet Smarter, which is a company that wanted to be the Airbnb, and working with him. The biggest thing with young people is having to have people that around them that balance their youth, and as I said earlier, helps them take the vision to fruition.
I hear that. I heard that. Thank you for sharing that. And before I ask the last question, I just want to say thank you, Bob Fisch, for coming on the show. You definitely gave great value, great knowledge, something we can all sink our teeth into. And once again, Startup Nation, the book is Fisch Tales, The Making of a Millennial Baby Boomer. We have a link there in the show notes for easy access if you're listening to the replay on the podcast. And so, Bob, I'm actually going to turn the microphone over to you because there's somebody out there in Startup Nation, especially with everything going on. They're feeling a little discouraged, feeling a little down. Give us some words of encouragement to take us out for today, if you don't mind, please, sir.
Sure. And I really understand that right now, and especially a lot of young people sitting there. What's going to happen to me? Again, number one, I think push to have connections. To push to speak to people who have connections, speaking people that might know somebody that can help you. Just sending in resumes aren't the answer, and not to be afraid to take a stand. You got to have if breathing life into new ideas, come up with something new and really get your point across, and not to be afraid to take a risk. And I think that that's the important thing, and to speak up. Don't be afraid to speak up. And if you really push like that, then my words of the best is yet to come will come to you, Dominic.
The best is yet to come. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Bob. I really appreciate it. And as always, Startup Nation, if you have an idea, be about that life, the startup life. If you want to let us know what you think about our show, have an idea for a show topic, or would like to advertise on our show, send us a message on the Startup Life Podcast Facebook page. And while you are there, like and follow our page as well. It's a great way for us to engage with you, Startup Nation, and really grow our community. The link is there in the show notes. Subscribe to the show as it can be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or even on your Facebook timeline or any other platform you like to get your podcast. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you find our content valuable, please give us a 5-star rating, as it will help us climb the charts and help more people find our show. You can also listen to the show on the Startup Life Podcast new website. There you will find the all-new startup blog where I write on many topics that are interesting and helpful to you on your path to entrepreneurship. And hey, if you have an idea, be about that life, the startup life.